We are making our way through Daniel. So last week we just kind of had a general introduction of the book and whatnot, and so we'll do a couple things as we kind of discussed. We thought, well, if there's a significant tie into Revelation, we'll kind of bring that out. So we have one of those from chapter 1. So we'll look at the link with Revelation and how that applies. We'll also just kind of we'll learn a little bit of history in this sense of the Babylonian captivity, because we usually give a particular date, but it was really several kind of invasions over a period of time. So, okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, so let's go ahead and open up to Daniel 1. So this chapter, it's all in Hebrew. We won't get to the Aramaic part till later. Okay.
You said that. I wasn't here last week. Maybe you said this last week. Why is part of it in Hebrew and part of it in Aramaic?
Oh, well, it doesn't exactly say why.
Okay. But there's no theory or thoughts on that?
Well, Hello? Okay, we have sound. Well, Daniel served in the court, and Aramaic was the language of the empire. So it's not weird that it would be written in Aramaic, but just a part of it. And the stuff that's in there is really it's kind of what's called Imperial Aramaic, and the style kind of puts it within a 200-year time period, even though Aramaic was used for a lot longer period. So it does kind of put us also in the time of Daniel based on the language style. Okay, so and really it just says as you read it, it says something in Aramaic, but really that's more of an editor's emendation, where it'll just kind of above it says in Aramaic, and then so the actual text, it just kind of switches. So yeah, Daniel doesn't tell us why. So, okay. But so Daniel is one of the first to go into exile, and we learn that. But what we'll find out is that this exile, I mean, if we go back, God said, hey, the covenant that I have with you is a public corporate covenant, and when you all follow the covenant, life will go well, and I will protect and watch you, and if not, well, I'll just kind of let you guys be on your own. Okay? And so in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, there are several warnings to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. So it's not as if the people didn't know, or the kings and priests didn't know. Okay, so we have Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 4, and Deuteronomy chapters 28 through 32. Okay, so Deuteronomy 4 warns Israel about the consequences of idolatry. Okay, and of course, what were the people of Israel always tempted to do? Right? So it's like, well, what have you done for me lately, God? And then those guys are having more fun. We're going to do that. Okay. And so Deuteronomy 28, so you have several chapters which elaborates on blessings and curses, threatening enslavement in a foreign land if they what? They walk away from God, don't follow his covenant, right? So, this doesn't exist today in the new covenant, this public linkage, or this exterior linkage, though it lets us know what happens spiritually, okay? So, and Paul kind of connects those dots that way in several places. And Leviticus 26, okay, what's Leviticus? If you read through Leviticus, it's really a hard slog, because it's the stuff that the priests are supposed to do. You do this and you do that, and a lot of it is just kind of like, kind of weird to us, but it's kind of like the rule book for the priests. But even Leviticus mentions that. Okay, so for disobeying God's laws, what will happen? Okay, and so that God will scatter his people among the nations, which happened. Of course, he brings them home because he did have a promise for a Messiah. Okay, so all of that is kind of, if we want to say, that's the prequel and the movie is Daniel, if you want to kind of use those terms. It should have been no surprise, and in fact, you could even see it happening little by little. And even so, there wasn't a whole lot of correction. So, if you... Well, Jeremiah, Isaiah, I mean, they both did, as well as... I'm trying to remember the exact time. Now, Jeremiah... Yeah, he ends up, I think, going to Egypt, I believe. So, yeah, so part of an Israelite remnant going there. Yeah. So Daniel, he actually writes his experiences, and he's one of the early folks who end up being exiled. So you really have 3 exile periods, and we'll get to that I guess we'll get to it now. So in the middle of the page we have the beginnings of the Babylonian captivity. So you can actually historically see 3 different time periods when the Babylonian Empire kind of goes in and takes Israelites and puts them into captivity. 605 BC, and then there's 3 of them, and I didn't list all the dates, but anyways, and so Daniel is in the first crew that gets put into exile, and it gives us quite a bit of information exactly how. See, when you're defeated, you're defeated and you're subjugated, right? But at the end of the day, if they're not going to kill you, they have to incorporate you into their culture. You have to become a productive member of whatever their society is. And in a sense, you have to have enough buy-in so that way you don't rise up later and cause a rebellion, right? So even if you're not happy, you go, well, it's more advantageous for me to follow the rules than not. Okay? I mean, that's the reason. I think that's required for any nation to function, right? So you have a lot of people who may be poor, but they still overall look at something and go, well, it's better than, but they still kind of agree to the system. It's better than not being that way. And when enough people say, no, I'm no longer going to buy into the system, that's usually when you have revolution or revolt or rebellion or something, and things get really nasty. Okay? So let's turn to Daniel 1, and we'll get the first little bits and he won't be mentioned for the first couple verses. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Okay. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Okay, let's follow this along, because a lot of stuff is happening in 2 verses. The first verse, very, very obvious, right? Okay, so the Babylonians come, and there they are, right? They go and they defeat Israel, and they take bring some of them into exile. Tells who the Israelite or the king of Judah is, who the king of the Babylonian Empire is, right? But notice we see these terms, but they're used in contrast. Verse 2, okay? So you have Jehoiakim, king of Judah, given into his hand, the king of Babylon, and some of the vessels of the house of God. Which means what? Plunder from the temple. And what else? And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. So in other words, the temple gets plundered, and stuff goes from the house of God to what? The house of their Babylonian, or to his house. Okay? That's kind of the contrast. It shouldn't be there, but it is. But there's an interesting term that's used that's not often used too much. Did you notice the name? The land of Shinar? Does that ring a bell? So you have to go back to Genesis 11. At least I think it's in Genesis 11. That's the Tower of Babel, right? And so the people there, they try to build a tower to God, And of course, it explains the people in their arrogance say, well, we can be like God and nothing can stop us. So it's really a human hubris that kind of sets them on this quest where they kind of, humans see themselves in the place of God. So God says, not going to happen, right? So that's basically Babylon, but why is that name being used? Because it's to pull us back to Genesis 11, right? So that God stopped what was going on. So here, the question is, whom does God stop in this case? See, so it says specifically, but then by using the term Shinar, if we know biblical history, that's two statements being made that this is by God's doing. So if we want to say it's God's will, okay, in that what? The people need a course of correction. Okay? So, it's because what does it say? The Lord gave. Catch that? So the Lord gave Jehoiakim. Okay? And then the land of Shinar. So in other words, God is doing the same thing that he did at the Tower of Babel with Israel. He's taking them down and lowering them a notch. Because they're too full of themselves and they're not getting the message. Especially as it went on. God had given Israel numerous times to repent. There were kind of 3 periods of bringing people into exile. And it kept going down the drain for the most part, right? So it's kind of... So sometimes you can see things and you go, well, why didn't somebody do something to kind of turn it around? Well, it would have maybe required too much effort or political capital at the time, even though if you look ahead, you know that things are only going to get worse. Okay, so I'll just do this because I like picking on Illinois because Sherry and I lived there before. So we lived in Illinois, and so in the 90s, we can kind of see, there was a point in the 90s where Illinois, if they bit the bullet, they kind of could have turned things around. But they just kept doing the same thing over and over and kept spiraling down toward bankruptcy and insolvency. And the state keeps getting closer and closer. And you thought, well, why didn't they kind of turn things around back in when there was still a good chance? Well, that would have been unpopular. That would have required a whole lot of work, and the present governor the present governor would have had a hard time because he's going to have to tell a lot of people no. Okay, so a lot of times if you're on a particular trajectory, it's hard to change course even when it's bad. Okay, and so that's what Israel was doing. They were on a bad trajectory, and it was just as if all the things were all just kind of set in place, and since the inertia was in a bad direction, it was just so easy to coast along. You had one king, Josiah, who tried to turn it around, but he died and his son was even worse. So, okay. So this lets us know that just in case if you think that this happens to be random or just world events, Daniel's saying, nope, God did this. And he wants us to know that God did this. Okay? So, now the implications of that we may not like, but that's what the text says. Okay? And so we talked about Shinar and all that other stuff, right? From Genesis 11. Okay. So, page 2. I do have a couple of diversions. So, I want to kind of bring up how the church has kind of understood exile in various points in times. Okay? And so on middle of page 2, how the church incorporated Israel's exile. And this will make sense because, right, at least the understanding of exile. So think about the hymn, O come, Emmanuel. O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, who mourns in lowly exile here until the Son of God appear. Right? So it takes kind of the exile of Israel in history and doesn't flip it on its head, but applies it spiritually. Right? It says, okay, old covenant, bad, go to the woodshed and get spanked. New covenant, God doesn't operate that way. But it's talking about just what? That the state of humanity is in a sense in exile, right? O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel. Just like they needed to be rescued. And so how was Israel rescued when they were under Babylonian captivity? The Persians, right? The Persians came along and defeated the Babylonians, right? And then it was like, okay, you guys can go home. And all of them didn't. And so the story of Esther is part of the Jewish remnant that stayed behind, right? So the hymn, O come, Emmanuel, is actually a very good, proper understanding of how we should see exile in new covenant terms. It does that for us. And so if you sing the hymn, it might just seep into your bones and you go, oh yeah, okay. So that's how we should kind of understand this sort of stuff when we want to say, how does the old covenant apart? We just don't want to look at it as history, but it actually has info for us to kind of incorporate. Okay? Okay. Let's press on. Okay. So we're going to look at verses 3 through 7. Now Daniel is going to be mentioned. Until now, he hasn't been mentioned, right? It's just that this is what has happened with Nebuchadnezzar. You have a bad king. Boom. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom. So some of the people that were brought back were what? Jewish royalty, right? Why? Well, if you're not going to kill them, you need to make them become loyal vassals to your empire, right? So part of this is, okay, he's taking the choice leadership within Israel and bringing him back to Babylon. He's undercutting it. It's like if we were invaded and then somebody took our intellectual brain trust and removed those people. We would still be alive as a nation, but right? But kind of a lot of the drivers of society, those who run the government or whatever else, they would be gone. Okay? And it would not work as well. Well, maybe it would. I'm going to stop here. We're going over Bible class here. So, but that's what's going on. We could see why. So this is, in a sense, to weaken Israel. So if there are any other problems, it's going to be easier to deal with. Okay? This is not strange when you look at the human history on how you may take a state and not completely subjugate it, but make it your vassal. So, it's kind of like if you're doing something, a lot of the times the government may contract something out, right? Why? Well, because for various reasons. So, well, if we can just keep these guys, they have a functioning government. So, things will still be there. And so that way it's kind of a transfer and we get all the leadership. If they're loyal to us, then we won't have to occupy the country or we won't have to deport everyone. I mean, in some sense, it's a lot easier. If it doesn't work, then you have to do more, which Babylon will do. Okay? So we can see what's going on. Then the king commanded his chief eunuch, etc., etc., youth without blemish, a good appearance, skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge. See? He's taking the cream of the crop. The guys that were kind of raised with privilege, but also raised to be leaders. Now, we may frown at this now, right? But when you kind of look at who have primarily been the leaders in the Supreme Court throughout history, presidents, most of them all graduated from our Ivy League colleges. So you kind of look at that and you go, ooh, that's where our leadership comes from, at least in the past. I'm not hoping in the future because it's scary based on what, right? In 50 years, I don't know what to think. Okay? So, understanding, learning, competent to stand in the king's palace and teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. Okay? The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. So, he's bringing them back, but there's kind of this, hey, we're going to treat you well, but at the end of the time, you better be, in a sense, Babylonians. Okay? Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them their names. Daniel he called Belshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. So other than Daniel, how do we know his three compatriot names? We don't know them by their Hebrew names. We know them by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? And in fact, they're not very common, but I think we all know people, or if we go back in history, we'll see people that are named Shadrach or Meshach or Abednego, but not, well, I don't know, there might be some Hananiah or Azariah, but not a whole lot, okay? Because we know these characters by their Babylonian names, not their Hebrew names, okay? So, but they're all chosen, so these are kind of the elite of Israel, and they're brought back, okay? And they're being enculturated, and the hope is to make them Babylonian, okay? So this, what will this do? Well, either you want loyal vassals, but if need be, you can send some back to Israel if you want to rule them as a vassal state. You can have people who have bought into the system and can go back and kind of rule Israel for them. It's an insurance policy for the future. They may or may not use it, but that's not strange. Okay? So let's look at the bottom of page 2, because we're going to see the names and what they mean. Some of the Babylonian names, they're like Meshach, that's a best guess. Okay? But Daniel, the Hebrew names are pretty well, what they mean we know. The Lord is my judge, Hananiah, the Lord is kind and gentle, or the Lord is gracious, the Lord is compassionate. That's what Hananiah means. Mishael, who is like God. And so you can kind of see God in there in some of this Daniel, so El is short for Elohim. Mishael, see, that's short for Elohim. Azariah, the Lord helps him. Okay. Babylonian names, Belshazzar, Baal's prince. Well, we say Baal, Baal's prince. Okay. Hananiah, command of Aku, which is the moon. So the Babylonians kind of worship Venus and the moon and those sorts of things. And so these are actually references to the Babylonian gods. So what we have going on is, instead of being named in relation to God, the Hebrew God, they're named in relation to the Babylonian gods. See? So we're going to give you a Babylonian name in reference to our gods, not yours. Okay? What's the implication? You need to become Babylonian. You need to worship, you need to be our religion. Okay? This is not America, where we're okay with people having different beliefs. Having the incorrect belief throughout most of human history has been considered seditious, because you're not of the same mindset and thinking as the king and ruler. See, so I mean, even throughout history, European history, you look at that. The 30 Years' War was what? This war over basically who's going to rule, because we can say over religion, but it really wasn't religion. It was the understanding that you have to believe what your prince believes, or you're a bad subject. So there's 30 years of war, right? And then after that they go, okay, we'll... And so at the end of it, the solution, which was not a very good solution, but at least it brought peace, was, okay, everyone's going, no matter what you are, you're going to believe your prince, what your prince believes. And if you don't, move to another place where you could believe what your prince believes. That was the solution. It wasn't like, oh, okay, freedom of religion. Nope. See? So it's not weird that they did this. In fact, that's the norm. We're the exception, our nation. And it takes a lot of effort to remain exceptional in the sense of that we allow these differences and we choose to coexist with them. It takes effort to do that. And so as soon as we quit trying, we'll go back to like being everybody else, because that's how the world runs. We want everybody to be on the same page, or we're going to squash you. That's not weird. Okay? So all of these names, it's taking Israelites, Hebrews, and turning them into Babylonians. Let's turn the page because we can kind of see what's involved. Okay? So, and you can look at this in each verse, you can kind of see this process. So verse 3 is what? To isolate. He's going to take them out of Israel or Judah and bring them to Babylon. Okay? And then verse 4, what's he going to do? Well, he's going to, endow them with knowledge, understanding, learning. Their knowledge, their understanding, their learning. Now, it's not all bad, but it's what? Their schools. So if you want people to think a certain way, you teach them certain subjects in school all the way through. That's not weird. That's always been done. Okay? Okay, and then what? Verse 5, right? Assimilate. Resistance is futile. So, and then let me see if I could, okay. So the king assigned them daily portion of food, and the king ate. So in other words, they're doing Babylonian stuff, right? Not Hebrew stuff. So we're going to find Daniel is going to be a bit different. And then, of course, in a sense, 6 and 7, I don't know if that's the right word, but confuse. So in a sense that you're doing stuff to say, no, that's past and gone. This is the new way. And part of that is new names, right? So when you go to prison, how do they refer to you? By a number, not your name, right? So who you were in the past, we're giving you a number now. Can it be any more obvious? That right? I mean, it's to basically strip you of your identity. Now, just using a number is quite dehumanizing. But in a sense, they're kind of doing this. They're taking away their Hebrew identifying markers and giving them Babylonian ones. Okay? So that's the layout of the land. So when we see what Daniel's going to do, we're going to realize that actually took courage, because he's going to buck the trend. It's always dangerous to do that when the inertia is going one way and you're the fish swimming in the opposite direction, right? So, I mean, America, in a sense, kind of has this love affair with rebels, but not really, right? I mean, if anybody's really a rebel today, what happens to them? Well, those in power try to destroy them. Yeah, we might have a rebel who might be the next president. Oh, but yeah. So it doesn't go well, right? And then even think about that. Think about even in the 60s, where you had these markers of rebellion, long hair and the way you dressed, and even in some ways the way you spoke. But you noticed that it was a kind of a group think, wasn't it? I mean, you could tell who a hippie was because of a number of things. So even rebelling, you were a clone. You were part of a group. It wasn't like you were doing your own thing. You were doing your thing as part of a collective. Okay? So yeah, it was, in a sense it was rebellion, but it really wasn't. You're just you're acting like your cohort. No, I was too young. Yeah. But I was taught by teachers though who were hippies. So, so there were several teachers I had who were kind of byproducts. So I was taught by old, stodgy, mean teachers who were old, cranky, and then I was taught by hippies. But the best teachers I had were the old, stodgy, cranky ones. And I didn't realize that until I graduated, because they're the ones who actually taught me. The hippies were like, oh, you don't worry about grammar, just write whatever you feel. Well, I had to learn stuff after I graduated because of hippies. So, yeah. So I'm not too fond of hippies because I feel that they left me high and dry education-wise. Yeah. Yep. So in a sense, they actually won. They did, because they're now the elites and they're driving. So they're the ones who are driving culture and all that other stuff. So it wasn't as if it's just over time they won. So that cohort is now in power. There'll be a younger cohort, the ones who say, "Okay, boomer." They'll be in power later, but I don't know what they'll be doing. Okay, so all of that, we see the layout. Now let's look at 8 through 13 and put yourself in this position, because everyone thinks, you see that picture of there's this picture that goes around in Nazi Germany, and everybody's doing the Heil, the Sieg Heil or whatever, and there's one guy in the crowd who's doing this. We would not be doing this. I mean, because when you're caught up in the moment, it's not just that's part of the worldview, but you're not aware of, you're too close to something to really know how bad it's going to get, right? So Daniel is the guy that does this, folds his arms, but he does it very diplomatically, tactful, and respectfully, which helps. So he's being a rebel in a non-rebel way. Okay, 8 through 13. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. So he's asking, in a sense, permission, isn't he? He's not saying, I won't, but he's couching it in a way that the eunuch can agree to. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and drink, for why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Okay, so he's saying, if it were up to me, I'd be cool with it, but we all serve the king. And if he's not happy, nobody's happy. So, okay, then Daniel said to the steward whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. So their diet must have been pretty rich. And so for 10 days, if you're eating vegetables, you probably will be healthier. I wouldn't recommend only eating vegetables your whole life, right? You won't have enough protein, you're going to lack certain vits or vitamins, and so yeah. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. Okay, so that's he kind of says, let's do this, okay? So in a sense, it's kind of like, if you've seen people kind of do this cleansing thing or something, and then for a short time they look great. It's because, a lot of the toxins are washed out and they're actually getting some good nutrition. So this is kind of what's going on here, right? But you wouldn't want to eat only vegetables the rest of your life, Daniel. Okay, you'd have to get some other stuff, right? Octolavo or whatever they call that, right? So, yeah, beans do. So you can mix and match if you know. If you're a vegetarian and you're smart, you can mix and match protein sources and you'll be okay. But you just have to be smart enough to do that. And then figure out how you're going to get B12. That has to come from an animal source. So I learned that from hippies too, because hippies went all vegetarian stuff, and some went for years, and they started getting health problems. They're skinny, and some would collapse, and they go, oh, well, you need B12. So you could take it in pill form if you don't want to eat meat or something. Okay. Plus our teeth really says we're carnivores too. So, okay. So instead of a direct confrontation, Daniel, in a sense, asks permission, but also God is helping Daniel. See, so he's doing the right thing, but also God is showing. He has a favorable view. The Babylonians view him favorably. Okay, and so if Daniel is asking the stuff tactfully, then their view that they view Daniel favorably is not only by God's doing. Does that make sense? I'm not taking away from God, but what I'm saying is that Daniel is a tactful guy, and he knows how to work within the system. Okay? So, and if you want something done, that's the best way to do it. Instead of trying to destroy everything, work within the system, but try to achieve what you want. And that's what he's doing. Okay? And so in a sense, it's a test. And he says, well, if it doesn't work, we'll go back to eating, and probably some of it was pork, I would imagine. Or some foods that, the Jews shouldn't eat by Old Covenant law. Because otherwise, why, right? Why would it matter? Maybe shellfish? I don't know. But there are certain things that you don't eat. Okay? And so that was probably part of it. Okay? Well, let's continue on, because right now there's this test, but we don't know what's going to go on. Well, we do if we read Daniel before. Okay? So verses 14 through 16. So he, that is kind of the stewards in charge of, right, Daniel and his cohorts, listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. I want to see those vegetables. I'll tell you, because that wouldn't be me. I'd go, I want the bacon. But, okay, I'm in the new covenant, so it's okay. Okay? So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. Wow. I wonder how the three cohorts, come on, Daniel, vegetables are cool, but can't we eat a little bit? So, God, you have to be a fly on the wall there. Okay. So what's the result? It's a good result. But think about this, apart from kind of, hey, if it doesn't work, we'll go back. But if it does, so he kind of set things up so that way, the steward will need to honor it. But what is now the perception of Daniel in his handlers or steward or the eunuch's eyes? This guy knows his stuff, because he came and brought something up which was kind of contrary to protocol, but he was right. So he's going to rise in esteem, because even when it was maybe not the best thing to do politically, he did it, and he ended up being right. So barring somebody who doesn't have psychological problems and can't handle issues of being proved wrong, Daniel will only rise in stature, right? So you have some people who are really petty in realms of power and destroy anybody who, right? And usually those people, in a sense, aren't successful, and what they run isn't successful, because you really want everybody who is under you to succeed, and then you succeed. That's really how things should work. Okay? So everything is looking good. Well, now we're going to take a look at Revelation, because how many days was this? 10 days. Which book came first? Daniel or Revelation? Daniel did. So when Revelation uses the same, 10 days, it's, even though you're talking about a literal church with literal problems, the 10 days is symbolic. Okay? And it hails back to Daniel. So when we turn to Revelation and it's talking about the church in Smyrna, well, what's the 10 days? Well, basically, okay, let's just turn to Revelation for now, okay? Instead of me just talking about it, let's just go there, okay? So, let's go Revelations chapter 2. So this is during the part of you have the 7 churches, okay? And we will see the 10 days that are mentioned, okay? So, okay, there we go. Okay, so church in Smyrna. So, I mean, these were actual churches that existed and were there for quite some time. I think one church was destroyed the whole town was destroyed by an earthquake and everybody moved and whatnot. So, and to the angel, of course, we know what angel means, right? Messenger. It doesn't always mean celestial, heavenly being. In this context, the best meaning would probably be pastor. So, to the messenger of the church in Smyrna, write the words of the first and last who died and came to life. Words of Jesus. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say that the Jews say that they are Jews and are not, but who are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested. And for 10 days you will have tribulation. What is John, or at least Jesus, comparing this to? Because this is Jesus speaking in John's vision. What the people of Israel went through in Daniel. But they came through it and were brought back, right? So what is really being said, you're going to suffer. It may be a while. 10 days means, how long did the people in Daniel suffer? Right? So it may be a while, but what? Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Okay? So that's how the 10 days in Daniel influences how we are to understand what's in Revelation. Okay? So so it's going to be rough, and it may last a while. Because if we understand the 10 days, it's not, it's 10 literal days, but it's a time of persecution. Don't give in. Be faithful. See? So, and if they knew Daniel, they did, then it all makes sense. Okay? Does that help? So that's one tie-in. So whenever you're reading Revelation or you come across it, you go, oh, okay. So it helps us understand a little bit better what's going on. Okay. And we'll finish up with the last section. All right? Are we good so far? Okay. 17 through 21. I have to go back to Daniel. Okay. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and among all of them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So of all the cream of the crop of Judah that were brought back, these 4 guys were the most exceptional. Now, I'm sure it's not because they ate vegetables, okay? But God's favor was with them. But Nebuchadnezzar is going to go, these guys, I want them. Because if you see somebody that just everything they do, it just clicks and they do it right and it's intuitive, you snatch them up. Because people like that are rare. Okay, so that's exactly what is being said here. Okay, and the king spoke with them, and among all of them, none was found like. Okay, therefore they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. So what does 10 times mean? Way better. It's an expression, okay? So it doesn't mean he asked them 1,000 questions and, his guys, Daniel and his guys answered 10 times more correctly than, It just means it's a hyperbolic way of saying they were leagues better than anybody else. Okay? And so who are the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom? You might be able to see it in the word magician. Okay? Who came to see Jesus from Persia? Who later conquered Babylon? Magi. So yeah. So we say magicians and we're thinking, oh, well, don't think magicians like, okay. So these were guys who watched the stars, but they were also learned in many things. Okay. Don't think of them as doing magic tricks. Okay. That's what we think of magician. Well, no wonder the place was run so badly. All they had were magicians doing stuff, right? No. So, but it gives us a reference, right? That compared to the advisors the king has now, he's way more impressed with just the overall knowledge, acumen, skill, way of thinking of these four guys. So now, if you're part of the magicians and enchanters, where will you be on this? You're going to hate these guys. Right. Now, if you're the steward or eunuch in charge of them, you're going to go, hey, I love these guys, because in a sense, when they're doing so well, it reflects on you. Wow, you did a good job on overseeing these guys. You go, yeah, I kind of did, but they're pretty good on their own too. Right? You can share the glory and honor. But if you're not, so it's in the woodwork to get rid of these guys. It just is. If you understand how power works, somebody's going to be out to destroy them, because you're taking away my power, right? And so that's what we should expect. Okay? So let's see a couple things. What special abilities did God give these four young men? Knowledge, skill in all literature and wisdom. Yes. But also, they had to use what God gave them. It wasn't as if, okay, I won't do anything. So these are guys who have a lot of initiative. They're naturally bright, and they're receiving the blessing of God. So they're the cream of the crop. They would have been good anyway. But God worked things to make sure that they will be where they will be. So they're going to be placed in a position to serve God's will in a pagan empire. Pretty wild. God does that with Esther, right? So we see God kind of doing these things. And part of that does what? Well, spreads who the one true God is, but also helps ensure that his people survive. So the Messiah comes forth. So that's kind of what's happening in the big picture of things. Okay? So how did these gifts affect their standing with the king? Of course, the king's delighted. Who wouldn't be? Right? Unless you're weird. Okay? So early church fathers like Jerome saw in Daniel's gift of understanding visions and dreams a prefigure of Christ as the revealer of mysteries. And it even sounds just the slightest bit where it says, and Jesus grew in stature and wisdom. Just that little phrase, and like, well, what happened between, this and, 30 years old, right? At the temple, and then 30 years old, it's like this total gap. And Jesus grew in stature and wisdom, and that's it. See? Augustine and other church fathers viewed Daniel's continued service into the reign of Cyrus as symbolic of the continuity of God's faithfulness to his people. Okay? So despite change in political leadership, Daniel is still there, right? Okay. It reinforced the belief that God operates beyond human history, guiding and preserving his people through all circumstances. Those are little tidbits from the fathers. Okay? Well, that's Daniel chapter 1. Next week, Daniel chapter 2. And then we're going to get into the good Aramaic stuff. That'll be fun. All right. Maybe I'll bring up a few Aramaic words or something that I don't now know, but I'll learn by then. All right. Any thoughts, discussions? So, in these exile books, I don't want to sound weird or whatever, but they kind of give us a perspective, because as I mentioned last week, that in a sense we're now living in a culture which is really, in a sense, telling us to live by foreign ideology and ideas. And if you don't, you're going to get hammered. And that very well, Daniel could have said, hey, man, I'm not doing a thing because I just want to get through this and not get hammered. And yet he said, hey, really, I want to eat like God commanded his people to eat, which was really something to distinguish them from the rest of the people. God gave his people a whole bunch of things to do that made them distinct from others. The combination of all of them, not just any one single thing. And so these things distinguished his people from the others and helped keep them separate. And Daniel said, I want to be faithful. I want to do this. See? So in our culture, more and more it'll be like, well, okay, we're going to be called to be faithful. What are we going to do? Because it's now to the point where, well, being a Christian is not considered something good, but considered something bad. It used to be considered something good. Oh, you're a good person and it's helpful to society. And back from the time of President Eisenhower, right? You showed you weren't communist, right? So President Eisenhower, he proclaimed as the president, go to the church of your choice, because the communists are atheists. So we actually had almost, right, a kind of not a state church, but the state fostering, promoting church, because it was considered in the well-being of our nation. See? But that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, this is to do with this. What does it say in the Bible about in the end times what we should do?
Oh, lots of bad stuff. Yeah. I'll just give you the quote from Ghostbusters. Yeah, but the quote from Ghostbusters is more fun. Cats and dogs living together? No, never mind. If you saw the movie, never mind. So yeah, it's just, the thing is that when you look at history, because a lot of, we go, oh, well, I don't think it could get much worse. It could always get worse. Always. So we should never be surprised on how bad it can get.
Because you'll see things that you've never seen before.
Well, frankly, I don't want that to happen, but yeah. Because that means it's usually bad, right? So, and in a sense, I was surprised by how bad things in the last 3 years. I thought, how can things get so bad? I thought we would coast along, but I didn't think it would be as if, right? So, but, so it's, yeah, so every generation of Christians have thought so. But not to say that it won't happen today or tomorrow, but we need to put a perspective on it in the sense to say, yeah, exactly. And that's it. The whole thing is just live in a state of readiness, and be okay with that. Because you think, well, how long did we have to wait the first time for Jesus to come? Well, I don't know, but it was a long time. But Scripture kind of implies, when you kind of, that basically there will almost be nobody believing in the world when it happens. Yeah. So it'll be that bad. So, and then, surprise, the 3 people were right. So, okay. Are we good? We'll okay. Well, let's pray and we'll make our way to the divine service. Okay. Heavenly Father, we are thankful for the courage and example of Daniel. May we not just delight in the stuff that went on around him, but learn how he was faithful in a setting where that was hard to be, where we may learn how to be tactful but also faithful in our setting. We ask this, that with the Holy Spirit we may be able to have such discernment, that we may still confess Jesus Christ, still be faithful, but do it in a good way in our culture and setting. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.